It's good to see everybody this morning. Thank you for being here. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started right on time. I'd like to just introduce myself real quickly. I think I know everybody here, but just in case, my name is Melinda Martinez. I'm the teacher training coordinator for the Puente project. And I just want to welcome you here today to the day one of our fall conference. This is the teacher component, and we are starting a little bit early. We're going to also end a little bit early. So thank you so much again for being here. We know that you had to navigate all kinds of obstacles to get here, shortages, teaching through a multi-layered pandemic, everything you experienced to get here. So we appreciate you. We know that you are here because you love your students fiercely, and we appreciate you. And we hope that today refills your soul, is nurturing and fulfilling. And Anna and Josefina, Giselle, and Steve and I just want the best for you in the next 2 days. So thank you so much. Let's begin by saying that we're living through a very dangerous time. Everyone in this room, in this Zoom room, is in one way or another aware of that. We're in a revolutionary situation. No matter how unpopular that word has become in this country, the society in which we live in is desperately menaced, not by Khrushchev or the Taliban, but from within. So any citizen of this country who figures himself as responsible, and particularly those of you who deal with the minds and hearts of young people, must be prepared to go for broke. Again, must be prepared to go for broke. Or to put it in another way, you must understand that in the attempt to correct so many generations of bad faith and cruelty, when it is operating not only in the classroom, but in society, you will meet with the most fantastic, the most brutal, and the most determined resistance. There is no point in pretending that this won't happen. And that was James Baldwin, December 21st, 1963, in a talk to teachers. Most of us weren't even born when he wrote those words almost 58 years ago, and yet his words echo as true as ever. And it is in this spirit and in this intention that we welcome Puente teachers, because it is now or never that we go for broke. And in this space, this brave space, this day will be about anti-racist education, conversations, and reflection. Today, it is also my pleasure and privilege to introduce our keynote, Dr. Gholdy Muhammad. Dr. Muhammad is currently an associate professor of language and literacy at Georgia State University and serves as the director of the Urban Literacy Collaborative and Clinic. She holds her PhD in literacy. She has received numerous national awards and is the author of the best-selling book, Cultivating Genius, an equity model for culturally and historically responsive literacy. In my 25 plus years as a teacher, I think this is probably the most important book I've read. And so I just want to thank Dr. Muhammad and welcome her to our Puente conference. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And thank you, Dr. Muhammad, for this gift. This is truly a treasure, so thank you so much. Getting some love in the chat. Anybody have some questions or comments? What's come up for you? If you want to just unmic yourself.
Hi there, can you guys hear me? So I'm in my classroom because I couldn't get a sub, so you can hear some of the music of my students' voices in the back. But I wanted to share something that I noticed as I was listening to the different examples. Miss Muhammad, you write your lessons like a music composer writes their songs. I'm really touched by it because I think that's how we need to plan our lessons. And we forget because we are chasing the standards. So thank you for that reminder today. Beautiful reminder. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Muhammad, do you see a question in the chat from Roxy?
Yes. Okay, so how do we teach this if we have pushback from parents and administrators? Yeah. So this is one of the most frequent and more important questions that I get, and it's real, right? It's a lot of pushback. Just like we have students who maybe misbehave, right? Let's just say that. Yeah, the story doesn't really start with their misbehavior, and the story doesn't start with the pushback. We have to get to the root cause of why they're pushing back. I typically find that people push back because of two reasons. Ignorance, they don't know what this work is all about. They think CRE is anti-white. They think that CRE is just for Black and Latinx children. They think CRE means that I'm not teaching the skills and standards. There's a lot of myths and falsehood out there. And this is only being perpetuated in the media because people are not reading for themselves. They're not even reading, going back to reading Toni Morrison, James Baldwin. They're just taking whatever they hear and sensationalizing it and then going with it. So ignorance is the first reason. The second reason why a lot of people push back is fear. They think that, I'm not going to be seen as a strong teacher. And I've always been a good teacher. Or this is gonna like give up something my child needs. A lot of parents have that fear too. And fear and ignorance together, as James Baldwin said once, is dangerous, can be very dangerous. So when it comes to resistance, the model can help give you the language to parents and administrators. Well, this work is really about teaching 5 pursuits. Let me go through them and explain them with you. And then you can tell me what exactly you're pushing back on. Is it identity? I'm about teaching your children to learn who they are, but also teach about people who are different than them, different cultures around the globe. Are you in support of that? And they say yes. Number 2, I'm teaching the state standards. Our students need to know how to read and write and think and do mathematics and all these things that are held within our proficiencies. Are you in agreement of that? They say yes. Who's going to be against that? You say, I'm also about intellectualism. I want your child to stand in the room and know different people, places, and things. I want them to be smarter about compelling topics and people around the world. Are you in agreement of that? They say yes. We're going to skip criticality for a second. Let's go to joy. I want your child to see the beauty in the aesthetic. And you got to talk. People say you smile with everything you say, Gholdy, even when you're talking about folks. You smile. Smile, show the joy in these things. And I say, are you about teaching about beauty and aesthetics? Yes, I'm for that. Now let's go to criticality. Criticality is a goal that I believe that helps children to name, understand, and question the hurts, the pains, and the harm in the world. It helps to make the world a better place and teach about justice and humanity for all, just like it's written in our Constitution of the United States and our Bill of Rights. Are you about that? Like, let's stop the foolishness. My mother doesn't have to convince me to drink water. Can you imagine if she had to convince me that it was a good thing? I feel like, why is justice and humanity have to be convinced to people? But I get it. As leaders, we have to do our work. So ask them, which part of criticality are you against? Are you about teaching women's history and girl power and not Black history and Black power? Which one is it? Are you about teaching about pollution and animal cruelty, but not the cruelty that happens to Black lives? You don't get to choose, you all. That's inhumane. And I want to cry every time I say this because we are talking about people's lives. I'm not here to sell you on it. You're not buying a bottle of water. You're not buying a car. These are human lives. So please convince me, dear parents, why humanity is a bad thing to teach. And this is why our leaders have to, this is not up to teachers to justify and convince. This is up to our district folks and our board. They should be saying this. It should not just be teachers. It should just be the principal. So, and then show them one of the units and say, okay, which of these goals are you against? So I showed you different examples, right? If we take the example of what is your life's blueprint, This teaches your child to know goals in their lives and what can get in the way of goal setting, but also teach them about what is the history of a blueprint and what they love best about themselves. Which of these pursuits are you against me teaching, dear parents? So actually show them the lesson plan. They don't ever get to see the pedagogy, nor have they ever written a lesson plan. So that is how you address these things. Any chance I run for Senate? No, I'll try to be the US Secretary of Education before a Senate. I don't know if I'm ready for any of that. They need to read Uncle Jimmy. A talk for teachers. He says we need to go for broke in that statement, in that document, that letter. But you know, folks are not, that's a hard thing for people. We are not willing to give up something so that other people could have. And it begins with us. And we do spend a lot of times with those squeaky wheels. There's a lot of us who are with this work. You know, the question is, how are these squeaky wheels, if they are the teachers, how are they still teaching? Because their evaluations are not linked to this work. This is why people mandate anti-CRT and things like that, because we have never mandated culturally responsive pedagogy. We've only talked about it, encouraged it, and expected it from teachers, but we have not held them accountable for it. We don't hold them accountable for humanizing pedagogies as much as we hold teachers accountable just for academic success. So it's something to think about. We can rewrite a teacher evaluation in about an hour. I've done it. Every time I talk about something, I do it, you all. I want to remind us, we have so much genius in this country. We could do this work. So when people say we don't have the tools, we don't have the knowledge, the expertise, it's because we don't really want to push there. I went to our board meeting last night. Please put on our school board on the prayer list. Yeah. And I would love to, you know, I know how to talk to different groups. I've been a school board president too. And, you know, I don't get invited to talk to school boards and parents as much. It's rare. It happens more so with parents. But, you know, I don't mind, you know, telling people in love and kindness what this work is really about and showing them and facilitating these conversations as an advocate, you know, to you all.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Everybody hear me? Hi. Your work is beautiful. And I feel your joy, and it brings me joy. And I know when we're in the classroom with students, you know, we can emanate joy, and hopefully bring joy to our students' lives. But my question is, how do you help students, especially at this time, coming off of the pandemic, to be able to move forward with joy? Because there's a lot of pain, there is a lot of hurt. And I'm experiencing a lot of that in the class right now within their writing. And I'm trying to give them things to read, and we're talking about blessings. But how can we move these students forward into joy?
Yeah, so first, saying joy every day. So wake up and say the word. That's already a shift. Wake up and say, you know, do I feel joy? Do like a wellness joy check of yourself. I have to do that every day because I notice when I don't have joy, the energy I give off to other teachers, to students as well. And sometimes, look, however we are that day, we can't even explain our emotions. It could be hormones, it could be energy, the moon, as people say, I don't know. Sometimes you just feel what you feel, right? First, do your own check and then ask yourself, if I don't feel joyful, is there something I can do to claim my joy? Something I can do for myself, even if it's drinking water, like my mom would tell us all to do. And then, so show up in joy and teach things that are joy giving to you. Even if you have to adapt the lesson or curriculum a little bit, teach things that animate your soul, because that will show to your students. And then, you know, make joy as a part of every unit or lesson, like as a goal, and start that way. A lot of my lessons, even though joy is like the fifth pursuit, a lot of times I start with the beauty part first, like as my opener. And then I assess it, and I'm constantly checking in on their joy. So I created like a list of questions to ask students to assess their joy. Like, what parts of the day do you feel most joyful? Does social studies give you joy? Why haven't you received joy in social studies? Do you feel happy in my class? Those sorts of assessments, that is always kind of those checks. And make sure your text offers in the pedagogy some whimsicalness too. Even when you're teaching painful histories, teach the joy of that group of people. So those are some things I have done to sort of like center joy. Yeah, I can add that to the list when I send it to you. I'll send my joy questions. I don't know, it's just like 50 questions. I just be making stuff up, y'all. You could take it and you might adapt it. Every time I'm like, oh, we should do this, and then I do it, because I can't just talk about it, right? I got to be about it. So I'll send you the joy questions too.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, because hearing their pain and hurt makes it hard when you have an enormous amount of students in that place for a teacher to come into the classroom like with joy. But I so appreciate what you just said about reclaiming your joy and doing it for yourself every day, because that's going to help me. Like, that right there is like critical moving forward. So thank you. I appreciate you so much.
Mm-hmm. And take some time for ourselves, you all. Give ourselves grace. Sometimes this job should just be a job. I know it's like a mission for us in life, but remember, sometimes it's okay for it to be a job, and we put it to the side and we live our lives and we take care of ourselves. Okay.
Dr. Muhammad, could you, there's one question in there about easing into CRT, because at times the indoctrination is so ingrained that the students push back when it's not notes, quizzes, and tests. Just thoughts about easing in and entering the conversation.
So, you don't have to teach all 5 pursuits. You can start with 2 or 3. That's one way to ease. You can start with 1 unit, 1 lesson, 1 read aloud. That's a way of ease. It's not a whole unit plan, but it's a shorter lesson. That's ease. Usually people need more ease when it comes to the criticality. And so, criticality, I see criticality in 4 areas. The oppression of the land and the air, like pollution, that's an example. The second type of criticality is the oppression of like animals and organisms, like animal cruelty. Maybe you teach about that, or article nonfiction about that. The third is like oppression of ourselves, like telling ourselves like negative things, putting negative things in our body, in our minds, our spirit. And the fourth type of criticality is the oppression of others. So to ease in, certainly you can start with the air first and then move to criticality of humans. That's one way. You can start with the criticality that you are more comfortable with. So some people are comfortable with like criticality of age, or like, treating people unfairly due to their age, like age discrimination. That's still a part of criticality. And they're like, oh, I'm comfortable as a teacher with teaching that because maybe that's happened to me. You can start with those comfortable criticality areas, but you should not stay there, right? If you're comfortable teaching anti-racism, don't just stay there, teach about other forms of oppression. And remember, if you teach like a story that has 2 mothers, people think, oh, you're pushing an LGBT agenda. What you're teaching a humanity agenda. You're teaching about a culture and the different types of marginalization or oppression that group has experienced. Just because you teach about Islam, you're not pushing that Islam is a better religion. You're teaching about that culture that really exists in this world and the different types of oppression people may or may not experience in that culture. So that's another way of easing into this work. Age, I don't know, that's something, right? Jonah? Hi.
Hi, thank you. I've enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so very much. I'm curious is there a publishing company that is an educational publishing company that, in terms of when we're talking about stories, whether it's historical, scientific, English related, so forth, that really focuses on diversity? I know you've talked earlier about our publishing companies. We talked about the curriculum. Is there a publishing company that says, you know what, we are going to be able to show school districts that when we are actually talking about cultural diversity, when you look at what's in our curriculum and for all the disciplines, students can see themselves, not just even in terms of race, but socioeconomics, disabilities, whether it's their religious beliefs or even in terms of sexual orientation. Like I'm sorry, I just hate hearing always that term of other. Like, I'm tired of that word. I don't want to hear other. I'd rather hear, yes, we represent all students, all people.
So that's a great question. So if we're talking about publishing companies, so there are different kind of publishing companies. Some just publish children's books and YA books, right? Like Lee and Low Books. Lee and Low is a publishing company. They really centrally feature, if not only, voices of color. I love them. I love what they represent. So something interesting happened where, you know, when my book was really like taking off and people were really reading it, publishing companies left and right contacted me. They had been talked about. People started talking about them, like, we tired of this curriculum. And they got hit for equity and social justice, anti-racism, all these things. And they wanted maybe some affiliation with me, I don't know, to say that they're doing the work. And I don't know why they were calling me, because I was talking about them a lot. It's a lot of them. And, you know, so what started to happen, I have not found, it does not mean they don't exist. I personally have not found a company that I feel that they are 100% authentic about this work. Some of them put out Black Lives Matter statements. Okay, that's good. When George Floyd was killed, they didn't have them before, but then their products did not reflect their statement, right? Some of them started, like Newsella, that was one of the people. They wanted to adopt my model. And they offered to pay me $25 a month to use my model. I laughed. I'm like, are you guys serious? This is true equity, huh? And they said they created a Black Studies. They were in the middle of creating a Black Studies curriculum, but they started in this draft. I hopefully that they changed it, but they started Black history with slavery. I said, that's not where our history starts. Come on. And then, like other companies, they don't hire Black and brown people. It wasn't like, it was a social studies team to write a social studies for a school district that had 89% Black and brown kids. Not one person of color was on that team. And they're writing a social studies curriculum for 89% Black and brown children. So, but they have these sort of like Band-Aid equity things that they do. Like they'll have, like another company has like these reading lists of culturally responsive books. The books are phenomenal, but then they don't have other parts that are culturally responsive. So, you know, I don't think it's like you know, this or that kind of, it's like, is blurred. They are doing some better things than they did in the past. But I have not seen a full, I mean, of course, there's no curriculum that speaks to my 5 pursuits. I mean, and I see some like the EL curriculum, some of the topics are better, but I haven't fully seen there. The best curriculum comes from teachers themselves. And when school districts use their money to pay their teachers, I've been telling New York this for a long time. Why are y'all still spending millions of dollars on curriculum? The genius is right here. And so that's been the best curriculum that I have seen. San Francisco, I met with them yesterday, and they wrote a whole K-5 curriculum based on my model for virtual learning last year. They weren't playing around. All of it's all digital, in digital format. They didn't wait. They just said, we're going to do it. And it, from the modules they showed me, it looked really good. And so, you know, that's just something to think about. And what I do is coach teachers on how to do that. Because we can write really the whole year in the summer. But teachers have to be compensated. They have to be paid. I mean, it's their time. Come on.
Sounds like what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that this magnificent group of Cuentistas that I have had the privilege of being a part of, we could all look and say, hey, each of us is going to take some kind of lesson plan that is culturally relevant for our students, and we will now create an actual curriculum where it's not just the other kids, it's not all Chicano studies, it's not all Black studies, it's not all Asian, but we can take our collective wisdom and understanding and build an actual language arts 9 through 12 curriculum for districts to utilize and say, this should be the standard curriculum, not the other.
Exactly. It cannot be, because when this stuff happens, it's always supplemental. It's
Correct.
never the standard. So you're absolutely right.
All right, just wanted to clarify. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Did I get to everybody's questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Muhammad. This means so much to us, and you've given us so much inspiration to move forward from here, and just thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all that you all do. And like I said, you'll get all of this sent and it'll be shared with you. And if you have anything else to follow up on, please just reach out to me. I'll answer everybody's email. It might take a little bit of time, but I'll get to it. It might take a week, but I'll answer. All right, you all have a beautiful rest of the day.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Wow. Just wow. I think what we'll do is just take a quick 5 minute just to soak it all in, and then we'll come back in 5 minutes. Does that sound like a plan? All right, let's take 5. We'll play some Stevie in the meantime. So Jordan, Dad.
Who I need to thank for giving me Gholdy? Who I need to thank? Thank the whole Puente staff.
No, that would be Melinda. Melinda has been after Gholdy, advocated for Gholdy, and she has been on it. So she gets 100% credit for that.
Thank you, Melinda, because I didn't even drink no
Linda.
coffee today because I knew Black Girl Magic was going to be in the building. I didn't even have no coffee. I didn't need no coffee because Gholdy brought everything that we needed to have and more. I'm ready to go.
Absolutely.
Right. 4 minutes and then get ready to go. Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and take a deeper dive with the frameworks today. And I think that everybody's all fired up. We're juiced to actually start doing a little bit of puentifying on some of these frameworks. So, and these learning pursuits. What we're going to do today, and I just want to go over kind of like the flow of the rest of the day, is that we're going to go ahead and start with some of our classic Puente curriculum, and just take a peek and say, and work in collaborative groups and think about, is our house on Mango Street, is our curriculum, is it already fulfilling these HRL and CHRL now frameworks? And if not, how can we adapt them? How can we redesign? After that, we'll have a chance to also work again collaboratively with your colleagues, and we're going to work on a text of your choice for a little while. And then we are going to hopefully, if time allows, be able to present and share some of that as we start to write our own textbook, as Elizabeth suggested. And after that, we're going to have Dr. Anthony Blacksher. He's going to help us facilitate a conversation around how we approach this work. Finally, we'll do some time for healing and some deep reflection with Dr. Kwanele, and she'll come in and guide us through some healing and get us ready to do this work. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started on our next piece unless there are any thoughts or questions before we move on. All right, cool. All right, so House on Mango Street. We're going to go ahead and put the folder with our curriculum for House on Mango Street in the chat. And we're going to have just a discussion for about, let's see, our time check now. We have until, let's say, a 10-minute discussion. And what do we notice about our classic Puente curriculum for House on Mango Street? And which of the frameworks are there? Which do we need to develop some more? And also, you know, what are some things that you have tried with this curriculum in your classroom? Maybe you've switched out the text and tried something else. And, you know, how have you, you know, supplemented what Puente has given you? And so we're going to go ahead and take a chance right now to go into breakout rooms and talk with your colleagues about House on Mango Street. All right. I'm going to ask if you would like to, if we could debrief this, maybe spend 15 minutes chatting about, you know, how did your conversation go? I realized that some of you did not get the questions broadcast, but still had good conversations. What came up when you were talking about the House on Mango Street? This is a cornerstone curriculum piece, you know, thinking about what Dr. Muhammad presented. What were your thoughts?
I'll go.
Thank you.
In our group, we felt that we had the identity part pretty solid. We were pretty confident with that part, but we didn't really get to all of the categories. Mm-hmm. And we would have liked, it would have been helpful if we had had Gholdy's tree up.
Yeah.
And back to that.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I know in Puente, we do identity really well. We got that, right? I think all of most of our units that we're doing, most of our curriculum, you know, we start with identity, and that has always been the Puente pedagogy. So yes, we do that well.
So we had an interesting discussion in our group. Some of us are teaching 10th grade, so we taught House on Mango last year, and some of us are, there were a couple teaching it right now. And the curriculum that it's an old curriculum. I mean, the curriculum was created long ago with Kristen, and that curriculum does center on identity. Mm-hmm. What it doesn't do is the critical, you know, the critical piece of it, looking critically at what these people are experiencing. So I was talking about what's missing. I do with my students, I ask them based on, you know, your yourself, your family, your culture, your community, what are some of the issues that you see in the book and why do you think they're there? And they always gravitate. I have like the gender issue come up a lot, you know, so the males in my room or people that identify male will bring up the machismo aspect and the way that males are portrayed in the book. Mm-hmm. And then our females will bring up the way that women are portrayed in the book. And then it comes down to asking, well, why do you think like they're there? What can we learn from them? Which connects all the vignettes to the end, but that's kind of missing in our curriculum. That's not really in there. We're looking at how to read, how to close read, you know, hair, things like that, you know, why is hair like fur? Yeah, stuff like that. So that's what we talked about.
Good. Other thoughts? I see Brandon wrote in the chat that he wants a do-over now that he's 3/4 of the way through. And then maybe, you know, perhaps it's just adding some of those elements now for that last quarter as the assessment.
Yeah, I think for me, this is Javier speaking.
Mhm.
Thinking about Goldie's book and the importance of the historical context as well. I went ahead and I actually mentioned just briefly, spent some time talking about redlining and
Yeah.
Chicago to provide that historical context of Esperanza, and where Kathy is saying we just have to move up north, and letting them know how Chicago is divided.
That is so brilliant, and it also offers the opportunity for them to look at redlining in their own neighborhoods and communities. And most of our schools are in places that have experienced redlining to a great extent.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on what Javier was saying, because I think we talked about this summer, is like when you're talking about criticality, like what policies are impacting the characters in this book? Because it's like, you know, we don't talk about that a lot, like redlining, and then there's parts, you know, where we know characters are undocumented who just disappear, and you know, there's all of these things. It's like, you know, we focus a lot heavy on identity, but not a lot of the why are these things even happening, right? And even from like a policy standpoint, you know, what is in place that's impacting these characters in this way?
Thank you. Yeah, and echoed by Peter, and then we need to look at policies in our own community. Yeah.
That also makes me think of, at least at our school, Johnny Gonzalez, he wrote the multicultural literature curriculum. And one of the ways that we start analyzing literature is through the 4 eyes of oppression. And it's just, you know, like a not simple, but it is like a framework that we can use to definitely look at the ways that systems and people, you know, really function with these like different types of oppression. And so that would be something, if we want to look at all the complexities surrounding like characters and like systems and the different types of marginalization that we could use to like analyze these works.
Thank you for that, Elizabeth. We're definitely going to need to, when you, I know that's something that you start like week 1, right? With your Puentistas over at Desert Mirage. When you're talking about the 4, you're talking about the environmental first, all the way through looking at ourselves and others.
Yeah, so we'll look at internalized oppression, you know, institutional oppression. And so within those 4 eyes, we analyze like the work. So those would be, and then, you know, so the kids get these different examples. So by the time we get to the work, we start looking at all of that together.
That's great. We're gonna have, you will definitely have to share those with us, so that when we make our own textbook, as you suggested, we can start there. All right. Other thoughts? This is such a good and necessary conversation. And I just thank you so much for entering this conversation and being willing to do this and to look at how we are designing our Puente curriculum. And so we're going to go ahead and work on a piece of your choice and play with the frameworks a little bit more in a little bit more structured way. And so we have set up basically different breakout rooms based on our curriculum. And so we have the rooms set up for you to enter. Perhaps though, you know, you want to try a different text that is not in one of the breakout rooms. If you could stay in the main room and we could talk about what that text would be, and if folks would be interested in joining you there in that text, then we can have that conversation. And so one thing that happened this summer is that there was a group, or can I get a copy of this? There was a group of us who met for Innovation Lab. And what we did is we started with a book club. We looked at the book, and then we went ahead and spent a day, and then more time after that. Teachers were paid stipends to do some curriculum development. And so, you know, those folks, I'm actually have created some rooms for them to go in and keep working on that. And so I'm gonna, unless those folks from Innovation Lab want to work on something new, that's fine. But if not, they're gonna find that their room is labeled. So once you're in your room, there's a folder, and we're gonna go ahead and put it in the chat right now. The folder has the example of three of the pieces that Gholdy created. Those were the 3 Stevie Wonder, the song analysis pieces for you to look at and kind of dive in a little bit and kind of just, you know, just get acquainted with the frameworks. And then there's also a sheet in there, which is going to have what you were suggesting, which was the framework with the questions that she's asked. And so feel free to make a copy of this if your book is not one of the books in the breakout room and you're doing a different text. So just so you know what they are right now, and then I'm going to go ahead and take questions. The text that we selected were Enrique's Journey, because many people teach that. And we also Zoot Suit or Actos, depending on which one you would want to do in your group. We have also the Reign of Gold and Borroginius, depending on which one your group wants to do. And then also we have Drink Cultura. So many 10th grade teachers are teaching that text and how they would want to just do some design with that. Questions before we open up the room. You all have the folder in the chat. We're going to have a juicy amount of time, about 45 minutes in your breakout room, to dig as deep as you want to go with your conversation. So any questions before we go into the rooms?
Melinda, are the rooms set up according to each one of those texts?
Yeah, and there's some other rooms. So I'm going to ask, if you don't want to do one of those texts, or if you are not in Innovation Lab, if you could stay here and we could see if there's something that you want to collaborate on with somebody else. And we can just kind of, you know, go in the chat, put which one, you know, you would be interested in, and see if there's something that you can find to work on with somebody. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and open up the rooms. We got, let me see, we have about 15 minutes or so to debrief, you know, your conversations. Maybe we could just go by book and hear from folks what they discovered, or if somebody just want, or if we could just do it more organically, and if you all want to unmute and just.
Actually, can I start?
Yep.
We were on topic, Melinda, for a while, but what came out of this was the idea. What happened? Okay, anyway, so what happened was we were talking about alignment with the junior highs, because somebody was saying, well, I'm teaching this book in 8th grade. And I'm like, oh, I teach that in 9th grade. Some of the books that aren't necessarily, you know, how we have a little freedom of choice. And we also talked about trying to get these books. And we talked about like revisiting the idea of literature circles, so everyone can have access to the books and we're not having to buy 40 of the same book. we can mix it up so everyone has a chance at different books. So we were looking at a lot of different options on the books.
All right, Aisha, there's a request to hear your last thoughts on Zoot Suit.
Yes.
I was just sorry. My dad really likes the movie Blast from the Past. And so my first connection to the idea of Zoot Suit was that scene where they dance to the Zoot Suit song. But then later on, like I grew up and then I realized, like the idea of Zoot Suit and how it like portrayed Mexicans in America. So like kind of like seeing like the contrast between the ways that that we use fashion and how it gets romanticized by society sometimes and culturally appropriated versus like when in the past it was a way to oppress and kind of make people feel guilty.
I just love also the history of where the Zoot Suit came from from the streets of New York to the streets of LA and how that all happened. It's really interesting, but yeah. It's a symbol, it's a loaded symbol, right? Yeah. Other conversations? Maybe we can go by book, unless folks want to just unmute. I think Elizabeth, there was somebody wanted to hear your last sentence too.
No, I wanted to hear someone else's sentence, but I think I remembered what you said.
How was that for you, having some time to collaborate with other Puente teachers?
Brilliant as usual. I got to work with Peter and Annette, and we're just having the most profound conversations about safe spaces and whether or not we can really achieve a safe space, or the difficulty of really achieving a safe space. Because I think before this summer and having these conversations in this focus group, if you were to ask me, do I have a safe space and do my students feel safe? I would have said, absolutely. Do you know me? Yeah, kids love it there. Ask them, right? But these conversations have really challenged me to really consider what is a safe space? Can it even be achieved in our classroom? Given the systemic issues that we have. And then Peter came in and dropped the dope resources on us for our lesson. So we were having great conversations, and Annette was going to finish her thought, but we got cut off.
Mm-hmm. Annette, I don't know if you want to finish your thought. I'm sorry about the cutoff.
I'm at work and we started our break. So like my colleagues are here. Say hi, guys. They're coming on real quick. Hi. No, they know how amazing the training is. No, my last thought was just because we were now I forgot my thought, Jordana. But no, just out of the conversation, we were talking about like one of the things is before we left in the chat, the question about like what policies are impacting what's happening in the book. And so it just kind of led to thinking about, I think there's a lot of good resources, right? And then you could go a lot of different ways. So it was just a little overwhelming because it was like, there's so many good options. But we were talking about how like at the school level, it's the struggle of trying to find or create a safe space, and how you have a lot of outside forces though that create that issue. So it's, you can think that your classroom is isolated on its own and you can kind of create something internally, but there's so many external forces that you can't control that are going to impact that. And so how do you recognize that? How do you navigate that? I guess is part of what we need to look at.
I'm so glad you brought that up, that we have our last presenter today is actually going to be talking to that point, you know, that we are working within an institution, and you know how you know when we have to hustle, when we have to just flow, and what that looks like in terms of, you know, control, like what controls do we have. And so anyway, that's my dog's going crazy. Males here. Other thoughts about the conversation? I'm curious to hear from the Enrique's Journey group. That was the biggest group, and there were about 20 of you in there. I don't know if somebody can speak to some of that curriculum and what you'd like to see a little bit more of, or try, or play, or design more of.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to get my thing to unmute, but one of the things that we were looking at, I think we were just sharing a ton of resources. We were trying to work hard really to share and pool everything that we have together, things that we've worked on and things that we've seen. And although I think we were able to come up with like a few good things, it's hard. One of the things that we had talked about struggling with was joy, incorporating joy into this text, because it's so heavy, there's so much. And I think the group was really, I think it was nice and inspirational that they were talking about the activism, maybe an activism component. And that is something that we can incorporate joy into. It's learning all of these things and hearing people's stories and then bringing that out into the world and creating change, or trying to create change as students. But if anyone else has any ideas for how we could incorporate joy into things that are just really difficult, especially like Enrique's Journey, we would be happy to hear them.
Thank you for that. I don't know if any of the Puente teachers were at PSI the year that we walked down to the museum, and there was this really cool exhibit on Enrique's Journey. Not Enrique's Journey, but it was undocumented, unaccompanied minors, and it was called La Bestia. Was anybody here for that?
I was.
Yeah.
Yes, 2017 in the house.
2017.
Yeah,
Right.
it was awesome.
Yeah. And that was such an amazing exhibit, and we kind of recreated it for an SLC where we gave students like a black piece of paper, and they did what they imagined the experience was, and they put lines of poetry and created that the train. And it was just that act of the drawing and everything was very joyful, and the display of it afterwards, we had like a gallery walk, was really cool. I know that Brian has done like a lot of really cool art too in his class. I know there's also art and joy in that.
I was going to mention, Melinda, like I was looking at Gholdy's when she was presenting, and there was this one where she was presenting a lesson, and it was on kindred. And I know that in the identity part, it was all about students will understand their own stories and the stories of their ancestors. So when we were thinking about like Enrique's journey, and he's taken this journey, I'm not paralleling this at all, but you know, he's going north, you know, slaves went north, right? But then I was paying attention to the joy section that she had there. And it was really students will lift the beauty in their own lives and stories. Yeah. So even looking at like, okay, that's Enrique's journey. What is your family's journey? Right. What is your journey, right? And what is the beauty in your journey that you're taking, or your family's journey, you know? So I think that when we are, I think that it's gonna definitely take some time to with this idea of joy, but then also to understand that like, not only is there like pain in these books, but like, again, there's pain in some of our cultures, like, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of my culture was birthed out of pain, you know what I mean? And experience, and that's just the real life. So I think it's just we're just going to have to start training our brains to think a little bit different. Not that like, okay, I'm reading, 1984. How do I find the joy? Like, you get what I mean? It's like, we're just going to have to shift our minds a little bit.
And that works really well too for Rain of Gold as well. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Speaking of Rain of Gold, we kind of just mentioned, because that there was something there that we also asked the question about joy. And I was just thinking that sometimes like our students don't necessarily know how to name these things. So like in Rain of Gold, there's like a lot of indigenous practices that maybe like the author doesn't necessarily like straight out say that they are. And so we talked about how students could like look at their own traditions and values. But then the question was like, well, do our students, like, how do they acknowledge like their own traditions and values? And I was just saying, like, I think it takes like a little bit of analysis, like on our part, to like guide them through that analysis. Like, what is a cultural practice that you have that like brings you joy, that brings you closeness to the people that you love, to your community, and that a lot of this is rooted in the indigenous practices that have survived because despite colonization, despite generations of oppression, and that's like finding the joy and the beauty.
Can I piggyback on that? Adding on to that, I kind of gravitated to what Gholdy was saying about where does the story start? Like, where does the story actually start? And I really loved when she was talking about the blueprint of your life. And bless you, bless you. And I was thinking about how Victor Villaseñor gives us the blueprint of all these people's lives and how they all come together to kind of give him the formation, or the foundation is really the word I'm looking for, the foundation for the blueprint of his life. And then helping students to find the joy in finding their foundation for their blueprint and then walking their journey. And, music, art, all of that can be a part of that spirituality, a part of the traditions, the culture that is celebrated, right? Because not only has it survived, but it's carried on to the next generation, which is them.
Nice. All right. We have a 15-minute break right now before we have our next presenter. So unless there's one other comment or question, maybe we'll just go ahead and take that now. All right. We'll see you in 15. I'm going to try to fix that Enrique's journey document. Something happened with it, so we'll see what we can do with that. So see you in 15. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have Dr. Blacksher in the house, and I'm going to take a minute to introduce him. Before I do though, I don't know, did y'all have a chance to look at the folder during the break? Wow. Oh my God. Elizabeth is right. We can build our own textbook. The work that you did was amazing. And I cannot, in 50 minutes, that you were able to do that work is just tremendous. So just thank you for putting, being so generous and open to really exploring some new ways to thinking about our Puente curriculum. Powerful curriculum in that folder. So you will have access to that. I will clean it up. There was one of the documents, the Enrique's Journey document, somehow got duplicated. So I'm going to just put it on one, if that's okay, and try to consolidate and clean it up and make sure you guys get those folders when you get all of the other materials that Dr. Muhammad is going to be sending our way. She'll be sending us some lesson plans. She will not be sending the recording, you know, and unfortunately, I know some of our colleagues weren't able to be here today to see it.
Yes.
But they'll get all the resources and you know, your contact information, is everybody okay with those contact information on the Google Drive lesson plans? I hope that that's okay. If you prefer your contact information not to be on there, if you could just let me know, and I will remove your contact information. But yeah, you know, I think that these are this is going to be a living folder, and so you know, feel free to add on to it, and then we'll have a chance to meet in spring and actually, you know, see how some of these curriculum pieces went with your students and how it worked out. And so we'll talk more in spring when you've had a chance to, you know, to work with your students on it and see how they like the curriculum. Okay. So we, you know, in dealing, I think that the questions come up about criticality, and we do have some ways that we are coming into that discussion and approaching criticality. You know, Dr. Blacksher is an expert in this as well. And so we've asked him here today to talk to us about that, how we enter into these conversations, and to share with us, you know, what he's learned along the way. He has an amazing toolbox he's going to be sharing with you, and we're going to go ahead and get started. He's a professor of sociology, and also he works a lot with the Puentistas over at San Bernardino Valley College, and he obtained his PhD in cultural studies. He is an amazing poet also, and he's a founder of Collective Purpose. If you had a chance to check out the website that has the bios, we put a link to one of his publications, and so that is just a whole bunch of dopeness in there. So if you get a chance, check it out, and yeah. So thank you so much, Anthony, Dr. Blacksher, for joining us. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Melinda. Thank you, everybody. And Melinda, was that you playing Parliament Funkadelic?
Oh yeah.
I just want to say bless you and bless your life and bless your musical choices, because you just put me in the best of moods when I hear that song. So I know we've probably got a wide range, particularly of age and musical choices. But if you were alive and got to experience Parliament on the radio in real time, I envy you, and I want to learn from you and study from you. And if you did not get to experience Parliament live in real time, go back and study and listen to Parliament, P-Funk, Funkadelic, Bootsy, George Clinton, everybody. I don't want to deify Parliament. There were some issues, some things. Don't do drugs, people. But at the same time, the music was great, and the creative spirit was just awesome. And I don't just spend all this time talking about Parliament and making that connection, but Parliament really disrupted the music industry, and they really disrupted musical aesthetics and what sound was supposed to be and what records were supposed to do. And they disrupted language, and they signified a lot, right? So the term funk even, and they played with the literal and the figurative, and free your mind and your behind will follow and such, right? These are sayings and things that I learned from Parliament that impact me just as much as Paulo Freire and Bell Hooks, just as much as any, W.B. Du Bois or any kind of critical scholar. It was the creative spirit of artists. So I'm tapping into a lot of that in this presentation today. And if you hear nothing else, I encourage you to tap into non-traditional or non-traditionally scholarly points of reference for creating your teaching pedagogy and your teaching strategy. That's how we disrupt a lot of the institutional norms that can cause so much symbolic violence. So, wow, that was not at all in my presentation. I was not supposed to be talking about that. That is something totally different. How I get there, you're gonna find that happens a lot, and we're just gonna go with the spirit sometimes. Okay, so as I pulled up my slides, this is gonna be a weird thing that happens. I'm gonna lose my hair because of the way the camera likes to operate. I wish I could turn off my self view when I do this, but in the chat, feel free to let me know that what you're viewing does not look right. We know how these Zoom sessions are. I want to be just flexible and understanding that your experience is what matters, and center how you are experiencing the presentation. So if something doesn't seem right or look right or sound right, not that I have a lot of sound or images, simply let me know. And I'm happy to stop, pause, take a moment and get it right and get it where it needs to be. Okay, so we are talking about race today. And thank you for the introduction. Yes, I'm a professor. Whoops. Okay. So I'm a professor at San Bernardino Valley College. I'm a vinyl record collector. Clearly, I like music. I like to talk about music. I like to think about music. Also, I'm not very good at skiing or snowboarding. And I mention that because I tried it. And I'm not good at it, but I tried it. And I want you to try things, and I hope that this presentation allows you to think about trying something. If there's a lesson that you're interested, if there's a person that you're interested in teaching or studying, anything that you want to do, I want you to feel encouraged, feel inspired, feel like you have a person who's cheering you on in a community who's cheering you on to just go ahead and try things. And if you fail and fall flat on your face, I'm giving this talk or hosting this dialogue, understanding that when I put on skis, I fall flat on my face and on my stomach. And when I tell you the skis flew over my head and I watched a ski fly over me while I was on my belly, I don't know how, physics people, I don't know how that happens, but it happened to me. So I failed and I tried it, and I treasured the experience of trying it. And if you can feel inspired knowing that the person who's saying this understands failure, understands it, but still the point is the process, that is who I am here. That is who I'm representing. Okay, Melissa saying, I can't see the presenter, only the about me box. Oh, you don't see me floating over? Oh no. All right, let me change slides and maybe that will help. All right, and we can always just go back to the traditional way. If someone else wants to chime in on the chat, you should be able to see me. You should also be able to see a box that says agenda. Okay. All right. So it's one person. We won't change it. Floating and flying in the clouds. All right. So today, you know, we talked a little bit about who I am, just giving an introduction. I'll get to hear some of your voices in a discussion. I'll touch briefly about why, the purpose. And then I like what Melinda says, the toolbox. We'll talk about some tools that you can have in your toolbox, some things to get you prepared, motivated, inspired, and even protected to engage in brave conversations, tough conversations around race and ethnicity. And hopefully, you know, I know time is tight, but make time for reflections. We'll certainly make time for questions, but also reflections. I'm sure I can learn from you as much, if not more, than what you can learn from me. So, all right, here we go. Why do we do this? To quote the great scholars De La Soul, the stakes is high. You know the stakes is high. High, you know the stakes is high. You know the stakes is high. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram on any given day and find a student recording of something that a teacher said. And I'm a college professor. Certainly they love to bring the cameras and record and take what you say out of context and post it to the internet and have that aha, we got you moment. Look what they're teaching, look what they're doing, look what they're saying, yada, 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 yada. That's what I call the stakes is high. To be able to teach while simultaneously protecting yourself. I don't know about you, but I thoroughly enjoy being able to provide for my family. Even when I was an adjunct, even when I was a substitute teacher, making $100 a day, that $100 a day, I greatly appreciated it because I knew what it was like not to have that. So anything I could do to not mess that up, I did not want to do. However, I also felt a void and an inadequacy in my heart and in my spirit that I was not telling truth to power, that I was not giving students an empowerment, a fulfillment that the teachers who I most treasure were doing for me. And so I had to negotiate this. I had to figure out how to be brave, how to speak truth power, how to use teaching lessons, scholarship, all of these things without, for the lack of better terms, without losing my job, without causing controversy. That was and still is a learning process. But I want to acknowledge what's going on in society around us that make the stakes feel even higher. Or as we get more prestige or more status, the stakes become higher to us. That is the purpose of, and that's what's at the center of this talk today. It's acknowledging that if the stakes are high, but we feel the urgency, we feel the calling, we feel compelled to use our voice, use our knowledge, use our scholarship, use our passion for teaching and our passion for our students to inspire them, to empower them, to create the world that they want to be, which hopefully is a more just world, a more equitable world. Then we know that there's going to be pushback. We know there's going to be, as the folks will say, the trials and tribulations that come with doing this work. So the purpose is to give us insight, give us confidence, and give us tools that will allow us to do this work, to speak that truth to power, to create critical consciousness. Now, I use the word brave space. I use the word brave space. This is not something that I invented. This is something that I heard a long time ago during the safe space movement. And in colleges, the safe space movement were, let me say it this way, in the college that I was attending during the safe space movement, a lot of it centered around issues of identity, particularly for LGBTQ plus community members, where at the time, this is the 2000s, at the time, there was an encouragement to come out, there was pushing out, And students were grappling with that while simultaneously grappling with who they were as young adults in a college campus setting. So on our campus, the safe space movement really took hold, where professors would have stickers on their door, classified and employees would have stickers on their door, and you could come and be who you are. This was a safe space. And that would trickle into the classroom, where folks wanted to say, we want to have classrooms that are safe spaces. And as I became an instructor, I realized very quickly, my classroom is not a safe space. If you are coming in with certain types of traumas, if you are coming in grappling with certain types of things, this is not going to be a safe space for you. Now, this didn't mean that I needed to come in and attack. What this simply meant was, we are going to engage in some of the issues that dive right at the very heart of what your traumas might be. And that's simply because, for me as a sociology instructor, this is the way the world is put together and the way the world is held together. Time has moved on. As I recognize that my classroom, we needed to engage in things that maybe were not safe. We started seeing the language of brave space. And I quickly came to embrace this and embrace the work around the brave spaces, because you can see that in a safe space, some tenets of a safe space are where you agree to disagree, you withhold personal attacks, you encourage people, don't take things personally and assume the positive intent, and we focus on the respect of others. In a brave space, we shift some of those tenets, right? Rather than agree to disagree and just walk out, okay, well, it is what it is. No, we're going to have some controversy, but we're going to be civil about it. We are going to still not have personal attacks, but we're going to distinguish between ideas and people. We are going to tell you, take care of yourself. When the conversation gets rough, if you need to step out or check out, feel free. You have permission. To give a quick personal example, when I know I have certain students who are going through certain issues, and that's where we are in the text, I'll say, hey, this is what we're talking about. If you need to stay home that day, I'm happy to give you some additional things. For example, I have a student, Muslim. We're looking at a specific topic. It's tapping right into the heart of issues of stereotypes of Muslims, of Islam, that go into terrorists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a media studies type of class. And I said, I think you already know everything. You're good if you're not ready to come to class for that, if that's not what you want to do, because we've had that conversation, we have that personal relationship, right? So investing in helping students, empowering students to take care of themselves. Owning your intentions and your impact. And again, you see it first and you see it last. Engaging in controversy with civility. Now, I know that might be difficult for young people. Trust me, it's difficult in college too. Sometimes that means modeling what civility looks like. I'm not going to get too much into these tenets, but I do want to hold space. I should say I want to hold time to distinguish between the brave space and the safe spaces. So now I get to your voice. I want to do a quick activity here. Uh-oh, I just completely lost the camera. That's okay. That'll be distracting if you see what I see on the camera. That's okay. So what I want you to do, and I was thinking about putting this in small groups, but you know what? I'm gonna ask that you do this as a reflection. So you can do this on a side piece of paper. You can do this on your notes. You can do this on a Word document. You can just think about it for 2 minutes, however you want to do this as a reflection. But we have two images. We have two images. One image on the left, one image on the right. Both of these images are taking place at the same site. One is a demonstration from June 4th, 2020 in front of the Capitol following the death of George Floyd. The other is an image of supporters of the president on June 6, 2021. I want you to look at these images, and then I have 5 words on the left. The words are riot, rally, protest, insurrection, and demonstration. Reflect on these 2 questions. Which words can be used to describe both images? And which words apply to the image on the left? And which words apply to the image on the right? Right? Gonna go 2 minutes for that, 2 minutes for that. And we'll tap back in. And we're gonna talk about it. So don't feel in a rush. Don't worry, if you have thoughts and ideas, we're gonna call you in. But let's take 2 minutes for reflection. I've got 11:20. When my clock hits 11:22, we'll come back. Okay, I've got 11:22. I've also got my video back. So let's do a quick stop share. And let's open it up. Would anybody like to tell us? Oh, I probably should have shared. That way you could see the images. Okay, my fault. I messed that up. Would anybody like to tell us which words went with both pictures? And you can answer both of them together. Which words went with both pictures? Which words went with one or the other? Feel free to unmute and jump in. And I will call on folks too. I won't hesitate. Okay, I'm going to call on Melissa because your screen is highlighted in front of my face. So Melissa, if you can jump in, that would be great. If you would like to put your answers in the chat, you may do that as well. Let's use that chat.
Okay. For both pictures, I found it very difficult to even find a word that matched both scenarios or pictures. But I went with demonstration was the one I ended up going with. I could not connect the words with both those pictures, all the other words. So that was the one I went with. Do you want my words for the left and the right, or just the one?
Yeah, I like that. Demonstration for both. Which ones went with the left or the right? Feel free.
For the left, I put rally, and for the right, I put insurrection.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, my
Uh,
camera is not working today. My apologies.
No worries. No worries. I'm a cameras off kind of person, so no worries. Would someone else like to jump in and share? And thank you for all of them in the chat. I'm seeing them. We're certainly seeing them, and we're acknowledging them. Would someone else like to share through voice?
I'd like to share if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name's John Raya from Pasadena. I thought this was a cool activity. And it really got me thinking. I thought that protest and rally would apply to both. I know you didn't ask for what applies to the left or the right, but I thought that the one on the left was a demonstration because I felt it wasn't offensive. It was just showing. Whereas the Trump rally did make an offensive move. You know, they made a move that went beyond demonstration. So, you know, until I saw the two pictures, I really never thought of it that way. You know, just a passive, like, you know, this is how we feel would be demonstration. And then, you know, breaking through the windows into the building, that's not a demonstration. So that's kind of how I organized my response.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Did I say that right? Because I want to say Gene, but John.
Yeah, my mother messed me up. Honor to Jean-Paul Belmondo, who just passed away. I was named after him, but I'm 100% Puerto Rican though.
Okay. Yeah, you definitely activated my French. And I was like, Jean-Ron.
Yeah, it's a cool name, but I'm Puerto Rican. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And someone asked for the words to come back up, so I put them back up. I'm gonna not say anything for about 30 seconds because there's some good things coming up in the chat. So I want to make space for us to scroll through the chat and read that. Some of you have already been doing that while people are talking. I'm skilled like that.
This is Jonna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, you can't see my picture right now. I apologize.
That's okay.
I have in there that they are both a picture of demonstrations of people who want to be heard. The perspective to analyze is which voice represents humanity, respect, integrity, equality, justice, and allows for the true understanding of the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. There's more. Oops. I lost my own thought in there.
Keep going.
Hold on, I lost it. I typed it in there and now I can't find it again.
I'm reading it. You want me to read it?
Please, because I scrolled up too fast.
Now, whose perspective are we telling the story? Whose narrative should be written in the history books that reflects our democracy? Wow, great questions. I also want to, there was an early question. Were we supposed to know the background of each picture or just take them at face value? That's a great question. I can answer it, but I don't want to answer it. That's a great question just to think about. An image and identifying words with an image versus identifying words with a particular historical context and all sorts of different background information. That in itself is its own lesson.
So can I jump in really? Sorry.
Yes, Mrs. Jones,
right.
Go for it.
So I actually really like your last question on the slide, which is how does language racialize social movements?
Okay, take us there.
Well, just because I had to recognize my own, my own views, my own, maybe some would say bias, but how does my views, my perspectives play a role into the language that I use? So if I'm looking at these images, I'm seeing both as a demonstration, but when I look at what's presented on the left, I see that as protest versus on the other side, I'm seeing insurrection or riot. But my own views play into that. And so I feel like there's this discussion about connotation, right? What these words, that they have feelings attached to them, positives and negatives. And so even having ourselves understand like when you see definitions of those words, like what by dictionary, you know, if you look at that, what is the difference between a riot and an insurrection? Like those have meanings. And so it's really
Yes.
difficult even just to navigate like the words that you use.
Yes. So already you teed it up for me very nicely, because you brought us into the final question. As you're processing, you know, what is my own biases or my own understandings that I'm bringing into this exercise. That third question, how does language racialize social movements? What we've been grappling with in doing this, and for some, it's probably pretty clear and obvious, like, okay, there's a racial difference. Some of us were bringing a certain type of context, have thoughts, have feelings, have experiences, have had conversations, and understand this is a clearly topic around or surrounded or in some way, shape, or form connected to race, racial discrimination, et cetera, et cetera. Others, even if you dismiss that context, right, there's a very black arm with a black fist and a black hairstyle. There is a lot of white people in the other photo. So even if we're just taking the photos at face value, by attaching these words and thinking about what's happening, we are contributing or deconstructing, constructing or deconstructing our connections to race and history, race and events. At the least, at a subconscious level, perhaps with minor consequences. Of course, some of this might be very conscious and might have major consequences. We're somewhere in that range, but none of this actually matters. This was an entire exercise, an entire conversation for the sake of giving you as teachers, as instructors, as scholars and practitioners. This was all just an exercise that, well, one, if you want to take it and use with your students, feel free. I don't mind helping you come up with some of the ideas and things behind it and where you go from it and the breakdown and setup and all that. But this is all an exercise to hopefully get you to think about, I don't know, y'all. I'm terrified. Y'all are in here probably wishing you were someplace else, or probably wishing somebody much better, more suited, more knowledgeable, and much more of a professional public type speaker was engaging you and entertaining you. But nonetheless, we are here together, and we've just done something talking about race, talking about racism, talking about protest, talking about the very arrow that's cutting right into what some would say the heart of this country's divisiveness. We got here to talk about it, and we ain't fighting each other. The mere fact that we can do this without fighting each other, no, maybe you are making faces at me behind the camera, I don't know. But the mere fact that we got here, that's amazing. That's incredible. So if we can do this now, we can do this in the classroom. If no place else, as teachers, we can do this in the classroom. So it has me thinking about Gholdy Muhammad's 5 pursuits here. The exercise that we just engaged in connect to one or multiple pursuits. Some pursuits are emphasized. Some pursuits we need to work harder. And I'm not going to do, this could be a discussion, but for the interest of time, I'm going to go through it because I can talk about kind of the process and how I create that kind of assignments. I want to try and hit all 5 of the pursuits in any conversation, in anything that I have. I want to do my best to hit all 5. I may have to work harder for some are naturally lean into some things more. But in that exercise, I was interested in hitting the skill, which is applying applying language. How do we think about these things? How do we define these things? How do we make sense of what's happening in news, in context, photos, representation, et cetera, et cetera. That's just my area. I certainly wanted to tap into identity, and given a lesson, I would tease this out more. What does it mean when you see this many people of that color protesting on at the Capitol? What does that mean for you as a person, whoever you are? What do you see? Does that cause fear? Does that cause joy? Does that cause anxiety? Do you want to be a part of it? Do you want to be as far away from it as possible? So I want to tap that into the individual student and experience. Certainly we're talking about intellect. I want to bring in history. This isn't the first time that we've had a social movement look like this. Are you saying that on January 6th, they tried to overthrow the government? Is that brand new in the United States? Let's talk about things in the past. What does social protest look like? How is this similar to the civil rights movement, different, et cetera? I want to cultivate that intellectuality. Certainly with the criticality, I think that exercise fits naturally into criticality and critical consciousness and discussions around social change. Some of you are going to say, well, how does that bring joy, Blacksher? All the other four I can buy into, but how does that exercise bring joy? I remind myself often, my students want to be knowledgeable. They want to be informed. They want to know what's happening to be able to explain to other people. That's where the joy comes in. It might not be a reward that I get in front of my face. It might not be a instant gratification type of reward. However, that's an intrinsic reward. I know that joy comes when those students can explain, can make sense, can engage in conversations and discussions with family members, with friends around what's happening in the news today. That's joy. That's joy. That's an example of joy. Now, how do we do that today? When you have all these people out there protesting critical race theory, which as a sociologist, I don't have time to get on no soapbox, but as a sociologist, you cannot imagine how frustrating it is to hear people protest critical race theory and have no idea what critical race theory is. That is so strange, a strange phenomenon. Shout out to you teachers who deal with that all the time. Whether you're for it or against it, at least know what it is if you're going to protest it. Okay, so how do you do that today? Marcus Garvey says, we welcome the opposition of the world because we are determined to see the battle through. First, I say, even before, establish the parameters of your discussions, establish the parameters of conversations that you're going to hold, establish parameters of the assignment. Doing that not only that day or that week or that unit or that lesson plan, but thinking about that at the very beginning of the school year, thinking about that after every vacation, thinking about, I know at this lesson or at this time, when I hit this book, when I hit this resource, when I hit this, I know we're going to want to have these brave conversations. Let me set the tone for how I will lead students in a way that doesn't harm them. And let me bring students out in a way that cultivates intellectuality, in a way that cultivates joy, in a way that cultivates critical consciousness. I want to honor Yvonne's statement. She says it was supposed to stay visible. She was talking about whiteness. I thought she was talking about me and my slides, that I was invisible, but whiteness is supposed to be invisible. Y'all better teach in this chat. Y'all teaching more in this chat than I'm teaching, but that's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. So considering the tone of your class, considering the tone, forgive me, I use the word course. That's just a college thing. I know class, you don't tend to call your classes courses, but considering the tone, I tend to be up and down like I am now, where I get animated for a reason. I get quiet and chill for a reason. I'm always doing things about the tone because I want to invite tough conversations, rigorous conversations. And so my tone helps students find comfort and safety of when I can go in and hard and challenge a lot of preconceived notions, but it's still, they know it's safe. They know what it is. And again, I prepare for tough conversations, even on not so tough topics. Always doing that work so we can get into those things. So preparing for creating a brave space, cultivating critical consciousness happens before. And then it comes in the setup. When we get into those individual lessons, you're talking about a particular book, you're showing a particular documentary or film, you're doing a particular lesson. Connect it to your learning objectives. Always connect things to your learning objectives. Prepare for your content and resources, AKA know what you're talking about. This may seem simple, and I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence, but I have to do that as well. I have to remind myself, okay, wait a minute, I feel good. I know this, but let me have my resources. Let me have them here just in case. Let me give it one over. What was James Baldwin actually talking about? Wait, what was the context by which Dolores Huerta was speaking at this particular place that's going to come up? So prepare your content and your resources. Define concepts, explain data, offer evidence, take your time. I don't want to assume that all folks know and share the same definition of racism. I don't want to assume that. So I will remind, hey, by the way, everyone, remember our definition of racism. Yes, individual, I don't like you because of the color of your skin. Yes, that's racist. And also racism is institutional, by which the group that benefits often doesn't even know. That's also a part of racism. So I'm defining, and yes, I'm defining and anticipating what issues might come up. When doing this work, when having these tough conversations, when moving toward a brave space, anticipate what the critics are going to say, anticipate what the opposition says, anticipate where folk might feel uncomfortable, might guess. And maybe it's just me, I watch Fox News, I watch, what's your guy? Alex Jones. I want to check in from time to time. I stay attuned to what Ben Shapiro is saying, not because I'm particularly in agreement with a lot of their points on race and racism, but because it's a conversation that I can now have, even if it's just in my head. So now as I'm doing work, as I'm lesson planning around this, I'm like, if we're going to talk about the racialization of social movements, if we're going to talk about why the George Floyd verdict matters, I want to understand what folks think who I don't get to talk to, who don't necessarily share my thoughts. I will say this, protect your space. When listening to voices that don't necessarily agree with you, or when engaging with media that isn't necessarily quote unquote designed for you, or you're not their target audience because of your thoughts, protect yourself, know when to turn it off. I want to put that asterisk out there for you. Let me see, who can I pick on? Let's pick on Rachel Maddow here. If Rachel Maddow is opposite of you, please do not feel free to watch the entire show, because you have to find out everything that Rachel Maddow says. When it gets too much for you, feel free to turn it off, right? Protect yourself. We talked about what to do before. We talked about how to set it up. Now, when you're delivering the content and you're going in, 4 things. Make the material and conversation matter. I like to banter. I like to talk about music. I like to crack jokes. But when I'm in those spaces, everything I say, it could still be funny. It could still be music related, but everything I say, I want to move it to why this matters, why we're engaging in this discussion, why parts of this conversation, why this conversation in whole matters. I want to model empathy. There was something that I was doing when you all were giving answers to that discussion question, that reflection question. I was doing a lot of shaking my head up and down, a lot of thank you for that, thank you for that. When I agree with you and I'm in this space, I don't say, oh yeah, I agree, you're right. Oh yeah, you're right. I say, thank you for that. Thank you for contributing to that. That's great, let's put that in there. Thank you for your contributions. This way, if it's something that I do agree with or something that I don't agree with, if it's something that is, right or wrong, but I'm not asking a right or wrong question, we can gather it all and we can focus on those ideas and deconstruct those ideas, debrief from those ideas without having to reject people. If you give me an idea and my first reaction is, yes, yes, other students are like, oh, that teacher's embracing that person. But when I gave that idea and they're like, oh, well, maybe actually they're pushing me away. They're not embracing me, right? We do that. That's who we are. We consider ourselves connected, very much a part of our ideas. So when I'm in these tough conversations, especially around race, I want to embrace all people. And we can work on the ideas later, but know that I'm embracing you. Yes, yes, you matter. Even if you're wrong, you still matter. You're still here with me. That's also how I get to make space for difference. That's also how I hold space for inquiry and compassion. And Paulo Freire reminds us of this. Any situation in which some men prevent others, and Paulo Freire is a product of his time when he says men. So feel free to take him to task over that gender bias there. Any situation in which some men, some people prevent others from engaging in the process of inquiry is one of violence. That doesn't mean we get to pick and choose who gets to participate in inquiry, whether they're on the right or the left, or their parents are on the right or the left. And we say, we want a socially just world, and the Democrats are doing that. The Republicans aren't, because they believe this is this. So we have to, that's violence too. So in the classroom, we have to embrace, hold space, and hold space for inquiry for all students, And we can tease out those ideas later. This doesn't mean we have to patronize. This doesn't mean we have to say, oh, you're right, you're right, you're right. But this means we hold space for the ideas and the inquiry. We debrief, we deconstruct the ideas, not the people. Here's an easy one. And I'm almost done unloading my toolkit on you. Avoid questions of why. Avoid why questions. Why does racism exist? Good luck answering that. Good luck getting students to answer that. Good luck getting agreement on that. So I want to avoid why questions at all times. But this doesn't mean I want to avoid tough conversations. Instead, I want to use my other questions that get at it. Describe things, explain things. When was your first time? When was your experience around a particular issue or phenomenon? When was the first time you recognized that you held a racial or ethnic identity? When was the first time you realized you were different because of the color of your skin? When was the first time you realized that, or when was the first time you heard something, right? How does language shape your perception of something? Now, these are broad questions, but the reflection that we did today was how does language shape your perception of something? And I would deconstruct about how language influences race and racial inequality and stereotypes, etc. Okay, how has your perception changed? What did you feel or notice? What about something makes you uncomfortable? I like questions that avoid why, because why tries to get us to find or come to a specific truth about something. How, when, what did you feel or notice type of questions allows a lot of us to participate, and then it allows you as a teacher to debrief, deconstruct, and get to things that are in your content and what you want to say. All right. Now, when it comes to answering those tough questions, you're going to get some tough questions. be professional, be helpful, be vulnerable, but most importantly, take a moment to think about which of those you need to be. Take a moment, take a breath. Take a breath. I don't know if it's the best teaching tool that I have, but it certainly is the one I go back to time and time again. It's this right here. Let me show you. Hold on. Let me make my face bigger so I can show you my teaching tool. Here we go. You ready? Hold on, everyone. I need one moment to make sure that I do not get fired and I can continue to work in this job without any stress to my family because I said something that got me fired. Hold on 1 second. That's it. That's my tool. That's my teaching tool. That's what I use. That's my go-to. That's my go-to. So just having the moment to know, do I need to, you know, which we have lots of roles and lots of things that we do as teachers. Which one is the most appropriate right now? And finally, having it's all good moments, making time, in a brave space, making time, knowing that people can get invested, people's emotions and energies. We're going to tap into some tough things. We're going to challenge people's preconceived notions. So taking a moment and taking time to simply say, hey, we're all going to walk out here. This was tough, but no, let's go. We did it. We had a tough conversation. We went there. We did something that people in the whole country can't even do right now. Let's applaud ourselves for that. Let's go there. Not only did we do that, we learned this. This is part of our curriculum. It's part of our learning objectives. Again, we make the material matter. We made the conversation matter. So creating those it's all good moments. And I say this is, I don't know if this is a controversial statement for teachers to hear, but it's what I've seen work, which is offering students the liberty to reject knowledge. My job is, and maybe this is a college instructor thing. So if this doesn't work for you, by all means, I understand. But I constantly remind students, my job here is to teach you. My job here is to, you know, this is how the state works. This is how education works. This is what it is. This is me doing my role, doing it to the best what I can, doing it because I genuinely love students. I love you all. But you are a human being. You have the right to make your own choices. You have the right to choose what you think is best. And my job as an instructor is not so much to tell you what you should think, but to help you and guide you along a process of inquiry and knowledge seeking. So you have the liberty to reject the knowledge. Now on the test, you better demonstrate that you understand what's happening in this class. Now on the assignments, you better demonstrate that you know what we are talking about, what we're engaging in. But being able to demonstrate the knowledge doesn't necessarily mean you have to make your life choices by it. So offering students the liberty and the empowerment to reject the knowledge. All right, so, you know, my cheat codes, depersonalize it. That doesn't mean take it out of identity. Constantly focus on structure and inequality. Remember, Stuart Hall says, race is the modality by which class is experienced. So it's a reminder, right, that a lot of folks who might be white, heterosexual, Christian, men at the top of all the privileges, if they're not rich and wealthy, they'll often think they experience a lot of the same things because of the lack of privilege or absence of privilege that they think they have. That might lead people there. So if I'm constantly thinking about that, it allows me to make better connections. And I'm happy to elaborate on that more if I need to. And finally, it's the struggle over hegemony that holds us together. And if I'm using fancy sociology, cultural studies talk, then, you know, that's just my cheat codes. But essentially, the struggle for what's right, what's wrong, who we are, and how we're supposed to behave. That's actually the most American thing that we have in this country, is working and figuring out what it is we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to be. So I'm going to end right there. I'll end right here. I'll leave this quote up for you to look at and read. as we go, but I wanted to make time at least for questions. I think, yes, I lose track of time all the time, but want to make time at least for questions. And if you have experiences, things that have worked for you, feel free to put them in the chat or share out loud with respect to everyone's time.
I'm thinking about a question. It's a simple question. So we use, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay,
I hear
yeah.
you
Okay.
as well.
So we use the words race and ethnicity interchangeably. My simple question is it important to draw a distinction between those two things?
Oh,
If we want to begin with the definitions, right? That's one of the first steps when you're having a conversation is, are we all talking about the same thing? Is it important to draw a distinction, and how do we do that?
That is such a great question, Yvonne. Thank you for that. Like all things, it depends on the context, and the United States doesn't do itself any favor with the way that we classify one of the largest groups in our country, Hispanic and Latino identifying people. So the first thing I would say is the way and the reasons for the legal classifications of people by race and ethnicity, particularly folk who identify as Hispanic or Latino, Latin, Latinx, that's already a lesson. So that's already a big lesson. If you're gonna dive right in, if you're gonna do that work as a sociology instructor, thank you. Yes, bless you. I appreciate you doing that. But the tool from my presentation would be is knowing that and understanding what that difference is. Again, I'm thinking specifically, or I should say, I'm thinking especially for Hispanic and identifying people. Notice I say that that rolls off my tongue. I've been doing this work for so long that Hispanic and identifying people, that's just my vocabulary. There may be a situation where you're doing a lesson. There have certainly been situations where I'm doing a lesson and we're completely focused on ethnicity. I'm focused on Black folk as an ethnic group. I'm focused on various ethnic groups that we identify under the race as Asian. I'm focused on ethnic groups of various Hispanic or Latin, so specific Mexican, Cuban, Colombian, et cetera, et cetera. So if I'm specifically doing that work, then yes, I want to make a distinction that we are talking about ethnicity people. Our focus is on culture. Our focus is on the way we engage and relate to our families and friends and other groups who are like us and come from the places that we come from. A lot of times, I'm not focused on ethnicity. I'm actually focused on race, which is the way that we are grouped in this country and studied in this country or analyzed in this country and the data. There's, when people are talking about their identities, I say this all the time, right? Black folk, our race and our identity are very much like this. We came from the continent, many of us come from the continent of Africa, and we were brought in, we started figuring out, okay, we're together, we're starting to do this, we're under these similar circumstances. So our ethnic identity came because of the slavery, the experience of slavery. So that's developed into it. My brothers and sisters from who we call the race of Asian, their ethnicity and Asian oftentimes are completely different. I'm Chinese. I'm from China. My parents are from China. We're Chinese. Asian, we're not even connected to people who are in Japan. We don't eat the same foods. We don't have the same language. So that racialized experience or that racialized grouping is not really connected with ethnicity, oftentimes, I should say, right? When we get to Hispanic, Latin identifying folks, the census literally doesn't even have a category of race. So to talk about someone who is Mexican as that's their race, it's governmentally, categorically, governmentally, just completely wrong. But the lived experience of it as such, where it's like, well, it seems like race to me, sure feels like racial discrimination. So, I mean, I know I'm answering your question in a long way here, but as a teacher,
I'm validated. I actually am validated by this because I teach immigrant students who are just arriving to the country as well.
Yes.
And when having questions about or conversations about identity markers, when we get to the race and ethnicity one, it gets super complicated because all the words you just shared, you use to kind of explain the difference the way you see it is overwhelming.
Yes, right? And sometimes, oftentimes, like that's the lesson. Oftentimes that's the point, which is, hey, we've created this thing in the United States. And it comes from much of the Western world. We've adopted it from Spain, England, etc. And we create it and we do it here in the United States. So if for me, this is what I say to my students. So I'd really be careful and I'd really interrogate or ask critical questions about, what do I do when I uphold it? Right. And don't get me wrong, like it's great. Like, yo, man, Black Power all day, Rasa all day. Right? Power to the people all day, power to all people, all power to all people, right? All day. But we realize that this comes out of colonization. I see Ken in the chat. Oh man. Yes, technically our brothers and sisters from North African and what we call North African Middle Eastern countries technically are white, according to the census. Now, I'm saying this according to the census because I have plenty of friends. I've seen enough of Keeping Up with the Kardashians to know that they don't see themselves as white, right? They don't see themselves as having the same experiences and a similar enough identity as folk who in this country have grandparents or great-grandparents who were able to identify as white in the 1800s. They don't see themselves within that same experience, yet on the census, that's what the marker would be. So I never get into the habit of saying like, well, yes, you're white. While at the same time, as a sociologist here, I'm like, well, according to the data, if I had to do the data collection the best way, and again, to me, and in teaching, I say that is the lesson. How does our system of classification match and not match with our identities and the way that we experience the world around us?
And the other question was harder. Do you want to try it?
Sure.
So
if there's time, I want to acknowledge.
No. Oh yeah. There? I'll be quiet. There's maybe somebody else has a question.
No, Melinda said we're good. She didn't go there. She didn't do this. So that means we can get. Okay, try. Let's go, Yvonne. I'm ready.
There is a text. There's a therapist. His name is Resma Menachem. I don't know if you've ever read his piece. He wrote My Grandmother's Hands. And he talks about, in this book, he makes the argument that we cannot talk ourselves out of racism or white supremacy. He says white supremacy lives in ourselves. And in order for us to really address it, we need to do embodied freedom work, where white people do their own work, people of color do their own work. And the work entails literally leaning into the discomfort and fear we feel when we are in front of a body that is different from us. And then literally breathing our way through understanding our body where it is and holding that discomfort. And his argument is the more of this you do, right, you'll be able to be more liberated as a white person and as a person of color. White people, because they've inherited, the medieval approaches to interacting with others, right? that violence, that penchant for violence and domination and control. And for people of color, we've inherited the pain of having been controlled and contained and mutilated. And those are things that we cannot talk our bodies out of. And the way we act in the world, the way we show up, whether it's, violently, whatever you want, label you want to place on it, it's a result, it's an expression of that unaddressed trauma that lives in the body. And so in the context of your work, I'm wondering, what does that look like, or does it have a place in the conversation? Because it's an intellectual exercise, the way you approach it as a professor, but is there an opportunity for a more holistic approach where you're dealing with the cellular work and the intellect?
Love. That's the answer. Love. That's my answer.
Say more.
Love. Gholdy Muhammad said this. She said this just this morning, right? You can't do all of this if you don't love your students, if you don't love other people. That's the first step. That's every step with your right foot is going to be love. Every step with your left foot is going to be the intellectual, the theoretical, the critical, but every other step is going to be love. Now, this is completely probably not the professional discussion that I should be having in the scholarly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this is my lived experience, and this is where my work comes out of, right? It's love. Okay. Let me focus. Because I was just having this conversation with my wife today, but I want to bring the whole conversation into it. She's an educator as well, so I don't want to bring all that into it. But for educators of color and other marginalized experiences, what does it mean? I shouldn't say what does it mean. How do you practice love in a system that wants to kill you? How do you do that? That's the journey for us, right? And so I don't know that I'm necessarily disagreeing. I hope I'm not disagreeing with Resba Manikan's ideas here. Hopefully I'm providing a context for how that manifests itself based off of what I'm understanding. But how do you practice love in a system that wants to kill you? And you're staring and looking at people who are a part of that system that want to kill you. And you're a part of people who you want to help, but are buying and supporting and recreating that system. For my white brothers and sisters, or the dominant group, or if we're out of a context of race, other members of dominant groups, how do you love someone when you have been given the power to kill them? How do you love them? How do you do that? You have been given the power, and in many cases, you've been given a whole lot of money, and you get paid more for your ability to crush them and kill them. You're incentivized. Yeah, I know. I say kill them. Figuratively and literally, right? You're incentivized to do that. So how do you love them? How do you do that? That's the journey. That's the journey. Intersectionality, I think, is really important here, because as we have various marginalized identities, we also have some of us have privileged identities that we can constantly think critically about, right? And tap into for insight. I'm stopping right there. That's a tough question. That's a tough question. Hope I don't sound like a person who is too gushy feely, but sometimes I am. I'm a gushy feely educator. Yeah, it's hard to conceptualize love as a pedagogical strategy, right? It's hard to do that, but yeah, I argue that's the most important pedagogical strategy we can use. Okay, well, any other questions, examples? Thank you, Oscar. Yeah, that holistic teaching, that holistic healing. I'm sorry. Yes, that's the part of learning. And again, Puente, teaching to the whole student. Teaching to the whole student. Thank you, Wendy. Oh, come on, Wendy, come with that. Yes, listening as an act of love. Yes. Jordana says, who are we loving again? Whoever needs it. No, that's such a bad answer. Yeah, who are we loving again? Everybody, but how are we loving again? And again, I can't stress enough, protect yourself. Protect yourself. Some folks, let me tell you, you know, and I'm not speaking, I don't want people to, when I say these examples, please don't think like I just hate white people or something, or white people are the problem all the time. No, a lot of times I'm tapping into you know, gender and things I've learned and understand about gender. I have certain men in my class where it's like, yo, I'm teaching, there's a gendered experience. You cannot, this is how I feel. Like, you cannot just dismiss all of the scholarship and all of these experiences just because you think that men are being soft. And that pushing, that grinding against, and that frustration and that anger, I have to protect myself and say, yo, I can't love everyone into liberation. I can't do that all the time, all on my own. And I have to protect myself so that I can do. So that's just as important as doing that hard work, reaching and engaging of doing it, but then also protecting yourself. And that's important. Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
From Anaheim.
Yeah.
I work with predominantly Latino students. It's 99%. And then we have 1% of different ethnicities, and including in my Puente class. And my question is this, how do we encourage our students to have the brave conversations so that they can feel the joy of liberation because of the families, the backgrounds, the oppression that they have felt to be the students that are great students, right? They're obedient, right? So how do we free them to, yeah, no, I can't make them feel liberated. I'm not asking that, but I'm asking, how do we free them from that oppressive, obedient student to become a student, to claim their voice, to have the brave conversation? That's my question.
That's such a great question. And Jordana is probably my subconscious right now.
There's so still, I don't want to cut in, but I feel like there's still some power in that. You know what I mean? There's still some like, I can free you. I can create this, you know, because I'm in this weird space where it's like, even having some of these awkward, like, okay, let me just, you know, I'm finna say what I have to say.
Say it, well, I shouldn't say it like that.
Teachers need to explore, what are you even creating a brave space for? Like, because there's a lot of exploitation of my pain and my trauma, like that I feel like people get off on and they go home with after you didn't have me share and you didn't have me, you think you've created this brave space for me, you think you've liberated me, you think all of this, and it's like, what are you creating? That what are you like, have these conversations with yourself of like, what am I creating this brave space for real? Like, is it just so that like students can say these, like, you know what I mean? There's this like, there's this exploitation or this
saviorism. Go ahead and say it. Saviorism.
Yeah, there's this, and I see it a lot in this whole idea of creating a safe space, brave space, where it's just like, what's your goal? Like, what do you, and is this just about your classroom, or is this just in general, or like, you know, you want to, like, even this whole idea of you empowering me, like, that's, all of that is starting to be like hella weird to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Can I clarify? I'm actually talking about equity in the classroom. You've got students that are going to feel comfortable enough to have brave conversations, and then you got the students that are going to be sitting there listening, obedient. and walk out the door. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, let me come in, especially just in the interest of time, because and I also want to pull in something from the chat too, which was if we can't do, I think it's if we can't liberate them, then we have a problem. A big refrain is, and this gets to some of the really deeper issues of teaching, and I like that Jordana, laid out the charge, which is why do students need to be liberated? And without that interrogation, we can reproduce more violence, where our classrooms become this, oh, happy you're free from the experience and bad feelings of oppression. But our students know what the world is, right? Our students of color, our students in poverty know what's going on out here. And that may lead some to feel patronized. Like, why are you doing this? This is not how the world works. What are you teaching me, right? My comment, and I'm careful to say like my suggestion or what I would do, or this is how you do it. But so I'll just say my comment or my reflection in that is exactly what Jordana said. Why are you creating a space of liberation? What is the outcome of that space of liberation? I want to look back at those 5 pursuits and ask, how are we cultivating joy in this? I want to know, how does this affect critical consciousness, so that anything that's going on in our class, especially if we're talking about freedom and equity and justice, that our students would have the confidence, have the tools, have the knowledge to go out and create change outside the class. If what we're doing is just limited to our classroom and to our classroom space, that's great, but it should set the building blocks for them to create the world that they want to see. And I again, I want to hold space for what folks are saying in the comment, what Jordana was saying. And I want to make sure that happens without me having, without what we call white saviorism or a saviorism complex or anything. I want to make sure that this work that I'm doing and the system that I'm set up, by all means, change the world. And when you receive an award for whatever social justice conference, I want to make sure you don't mention me. I want to make sure that it ain't about me. That the things that I did, that's great, that happened. I'm not so much worried about how you change the world. I'm worried about the people who you touch and change, that their life is better. And I'm never going to meet them. I'm never going to see them. I've removed myself from the equation, other than creating the work that everybody should be doing. And everybody may not agree with that. That's fine. You're more than welcome to disagree. You're more than welcome to have different strategies. You're more than welcome. But again, I'm honoring Jordana's comments. I'm honoring what I felt in 7th and 8th grade, which is, and I'm also honoring what Yvonne brought to the table, right? That we have to go beyond the surface level. Puente's been doing this for so long, and a lot of people are I'm getting there. Okay, let me wrap it up. A lot of people are out here making money off of this equity stuff. A lot of people are out here, we call it, I'm just gonna be me right now. A lot of people call it poverty pimping, right? A lot of people are doing that right now and selling these books and aren't saying anything. And we have to, my challenge, what I have to do for myself is guard against that, because our students recognize that that's fake. That's not authentic. They see that you picked up a book and you're applying some strategies, and that's all you're doing, and ain't nothing there underneath it. So it goes to doing that deeper work. And hopefully, again, what I've done is just inspired confidence, inspired tools, gave you some traps not to fall into and fall out of. And shout out to all the teachers in here that's like, Blacksher, you ain't saying nothing to me. I've been doing this. Cool. It wasn't for you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. But for other folks who did need 1 or 2 strategies, thank you as well. So thank you, Melinda, for having me. And I'm sorry I went 3 minutes over. My apologies, but y'all were on fire.
Thank you, Dr. Blacksher. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, teachers. That was probably the most incredible conversation I've had a privilege of being part of and listening to in Puente. So thank you for everything that, for all of that. So with that, we're gonna have a really nice, luxurious, long lunch. I don't know if anybody is interested in like looking at stuff during lunch, but Dr. Muhammad already got back to us with some resources. So I'm just gonna pop those in the chat for you, and enjoy your lunch. And we'll be back at 1:15 for some kind of healing that we all feel like we all need, and so we'll come back and do that work in an hour. Okay, so enjoy your lunch. Anthony, that was beautiful. Thank you again. I cannot say enough about our next speaker, but I'm going to talk a little bit about her. She is Babalwa Kwanele, is a licensed mental health therapist. She's working in the Bay Area. She's had over 30 years of experience. She has extensively studied neurobiology and trauma and the effects of racism and poverty on communities, families, individuals, and complex systems. And she has created a really special session for you. We talked about some of the things, that teachers have brought forth that they've been experiencing this year. And really, she has put together something special for you. So I'm going to stop there and welcome Babalwa Kwanele.
Hello. Well, I'm so honored and humbled by the introduction. Gosh, it's beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, I'm glad to be here with you all today. We will be getting into some great material. And we'll also do some breakouts. I just want to give people a heads up about that as well, and some writing exercises, as well as some tools and things like that that you can practice for yourself, to prepare you for working with young folk. So before I start, if there are any questions or ideas or things that you're hoping that I'd be able to touch on that I might be able to weave into the session, go ahead and drop that into the chat. I can't promise I'll get to it, but I'll make my very best effort to try. Okay, so just a moment, I'm going to share screen. Do I have, yes, I do. Okay. All right. So and thank you again, Melinda. That was so beautiful. I appreciate you and all of you for the work that you do, and that you've been doing with families and children in schools. And the topic of this workshop is called Capturing the Humanity of This Moment, Healing-Centered Engagement for Ourselves and Our Students. And I'm calling myself the facilitator because it's something that all of us will be working on with today. So here's our agenda, and I want to be mindful of my time to keep on track there. And so we'll have like a warm opening, and explore the theme of this workshop. Teaching in a multi-layered pandemic, acknowledging trauma and loss, acknowledgement of teachers as frontline responders. And that may be a new phrase that you've heard. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before, and we'll get into what that means. How to hold space for yourself while caring for others. And we'll do a little practice. Talk about some acceptance and commitment, healing literacy tools for social justice. And we'll spend quite a bit of time on that and get into some breakout discussions around writing and doing some exercises and share out and have a cool closing. So the first I'd like to do is a land acknowledgement. And this is something that's more new for me that I'm doing with presentations. And so we acknowledge that this virtual classroom is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to a nearby nearly 200 tribal nations. As we begin this event, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of various regions. A land acknowledgement is a critical step towards working with Native communities to secure meaningful partnership and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their culture, resources, and homelands. Let's take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. I'm currently teaching online from my home in the East Bay, which is on the traditional unceded territory of the Miwokma Ohlone. And this is also on the, here's the website that you can sort of go to get more information about. So with the warm opening, I certainly want to start with doing something called body scanning and muscle relaxation and shake it out, which are like quick body movements to help to warm up the body. And this is like an important strategy that you can use anytime that you are in your classroom or before class, between classes, or what have you. Body scanning is really learning how to pay attention to our bodies. We have been through a lot, and I'll do quite a bit of acknowledgements here as well. And this is a tool. Each one of these tools are tools I would strongly encourage you to practice on your own before teaching them to your students. Many people may be aware of body scanning and progressive muscle relaxation. So we'll start with the body scanning first. And so the body scanning, what that means is that you're really taking a look at your own body. Like now I'm taking a look at my hands. I'm thinking about my hands. And in my mind, I'm scanning my body. I'm thinking and noticing things in my body. I'm noticing maybe a little pinch that hurts someplace. I'm noticing where there's some tension. I'm noticing where there's perhaps butterflies or whatever is happening in my body. And I'm noticing it. So you just take a moment, and the first thing you want to do is look at yourself. Look at your body. You're looking at your hands, your body, and you close your eyes and you mentally scan your body. Let's start from the head, from the crown of the head. You're starting through and you are scanning your head. You're noticing anything that you may feel in your body. And now you're moving through to your face. You're noticing if your jaw's a little tight, or any sort of sensation in your face, just notice. Then you're moving down to your shoulders and you're noticing it. Taking a deep breath in through your nose, holding it, and breathing out slowly through your mouth as if you're breathing through a straw. You're going to notice your upper torso, including your back. You're noticing your midsection. And now your knees and your feet. Okay. Now that you're at your feet, I want you to just take a moment and sort of squeeze your feet and push them down into the floor as if you are planting your feet. This is called grounding. You're going to plant your feet in the floor as if you're rooting. You're thinking of roots in the floor. And just push down and squeeze hard. Take a deep breath in through your mouth until your tummy kind of pushing outwards. So you're filling your lungs with air. And you're slowly breathing out with a slow count. Breathe in 4 and out 8. Go ahead and tighten your legs and your thighs as tight as you can. And let go. Tighten your torso area, your stomach, buttocks, back, shoulders, and breathe in. Tight, 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 and breathe out slowly. Now you're gonna do the face. This is where we all get a chance to make that funny face. And you're gonna squeeze your face like you're sucking on a really sour lemon. And breathe in, tighten your face, your jaws, and out, count of 8. All right, take your hands and tighten them into 2 fists while they're either on your lap or on your table, wherever you are. Tighten them tight, tight, tight. Breathe in. Hold it. And out slowly like you're breathing through a straw. And now shake it out. Shake all that out. Shake your body out. Move your body. All right, shake it out. Okay. That is our body warming opening. And that exercise, if you have questions about it, go ahead and drop it in the chat or unmute if you need to. That is something that also helps to reset the mind. It resets the brain and prepares the brain for the next activity that you're going to be doing, or debriefing from an activity that you've done, or strong thoughts in your mind. It really helps to reset things. So let's move on. Thank you guys for participating with me. So we'll explore the themes of this workshop presentation, and talking about teaching in a multi-layered pandemic. One of the things that I did to prepare for this workshop too is I took a walk through Muir Woods and said, let me take a walk and kind of think through this topic and think through where we're at and how would I present this to you. This is actually tree roots that have risen above the ground, and they are multi-layered, and it's really this complex net and web of tree roots. So I stood and I looked at it for a while and noticed just how intricately designed that they are and how deeply into the earth these roots are going. Teachers right now are teaching during a multi-layered pandemic. What does that mean for us? What does that mean to be in a multi-layered pandemic? Yes, there's COVID-19. And one of the things that has happened, quite frankly, is that it has become politicized. So we're looking at that around the mask wearing and the safety, many of these things that's happening, but it's even deeper than that. During this time of COVID-19, the world saw tragedy, racial tragedy and racial harm that has been happening for generations. And then there became this new racial awakening that's happened in this country. Simultaneously, during the time that we're having COVID-19 and people really suffering and having some very difficult times, schools shut down. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But what did happen is that there was such social isolation, and someone used the word to deprivation for our young people that have not been able to be connected with each other for a year and a half. Okay, and so that's something to think about, as well. So, and also acknowledging some of the trauma and the loss. Okay, acknowledging the trauma and loss. I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk a little bit about acknowledging trauma and loss and how we hold trauma in ourselves. Okay, and some of the difficulties that we may have in expressing that trauma and the loss with everyone. We're all going through this together. We're in a time that we have never experienced before in known written human history, with all of these things that are happening simultaneously and how these things are colliding together to create such a dynamic, interesting folly of stress, difficulty, challenge, and having a difficult time really communicating and engaging with each other. One of the things that I've seen, and it was predicted that the young people, almost in one of the districts that I work in, that I'm affiliated with, there were fights with kids every single day, physical fights every day. Just this past Sunday, a colleague told me that one of the fights escalated to the point that a weapon was brought to school, right? And these are some things that we can almost predict because we have not had the practice of how to communicate with each other, of how do we express this challenge that we're going through as teachers, as educators, as parents, even as students. It's been such a challenge, right? So I think it's important for us to have a talk about it and to have a talk about how that is expressed with each other and the unintentional harm that we create and not understanding the impact that some of that harm is creating to someone else and a lot of things that we're holding. One piece that I do want to talk about before I move to the next slide is really talk about some of the brain science related to that. When we are so stressed out, this part of our brain, the mid part of our brain that teaches us about fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn when we are in a survival situation, the body and the brain takes over. The body and the brain takes over in terms of how to survive when we think that we're under attack, right? Because so many things are coming at us at once. This whole frontal lobe part of the thinking, it's almost like if I pull the light switch, the light plug right out of the wall, but I keep clicking it thinking that it's going to work. It doesn't. Because I'm really focusing on just basic necessities of survival each day. That's what our children and our youth and our students are enduring on a daily basis. And I can't impress enough how much we've gone through this on a massive level. So we give ourselves a break. We have an understanding of what it is that we've gone through. And then we look at this other piece that I'd like to call is really kind of leadership with empathy and with understanding and compassion. So this next slide is something that I saw while I was on the walk. And so I want to acknowledge teachers as frontline first responders. Now, I also have to acknowledge when I first started talking about this phrase, teachers said, wait, hold on. We didn't sign up to be first responders. I didn't sign up to be a firefighter and EMT, emergency personnel. I didn't sign up to be, right on the front lines, to be a part of that. I really had this passion for wanting to teach and to engage with my students and teachers. I'm acknowledging with you that we've been thrust into the front lines as first responders. Before we've heard things like from our students and our writings that they get, and they talk about some of the challenges that they may be having in their family. And however, it hasn't been every single student. Now we're in a case where it is every single student. Everybody's been impacted, right? And the important part is that you've been impacted too. And to acknowledge that piece that you've been impacted too, and how challenging it is to hold space for one another, let alone holding space for yourself. There's this sign at Muir Woods that says sensitive habitat. And I kind of stopped. What really stopped me at first to look at the sign was I noticed a man climbing over the fence that says, stay on the path. And I thought, oh, I get it. Stay on the path to protect the trees. And I saw him standing at this very sign. It was really interesting because he stood next to the sign. He climbed over the fence and went and stood to that tree behind the sign to take some photos. And I said to myself, gee, I wonder if he noticed what the sign said. So the sign says sensitive habitat, protect the understory. And I love that word, the understory. Redwoods are the tallest trees on earth, but have the surprisingly shallow roots. Stepping on the roots and nearby soil stresses the redwoods and prevents hundreds of species from growing in the forest on the forest floor. In turn, insects and other wildlife that depend on these plants lose their habitat. Help us preserve this forest for future generations. That forest is us, right? We are that forest. We are the ones in terms of, and our roots are the ones that are really, we're helping people to grow roots. We're the ones that have been, helping generations, each one teach one, but each one teach 10. We've been working on this for quite a while, right? And so when we think about it, we help hundreds of kids every single day. So when we get to hold space for ourselves while we're caring for others, that part is very important, is to notice that we have a sensitive habitat ourselves. We're in a really delicate time right now. And so I'd like for us to spend some time practicing in terms of what that means to hold space for each other. I'm going to turn this off for a quick second and have a brief discussion with you about what does that mean to hold space for ourselves while caring for others. Usually as first responders, I do quite a bit of trauma work and have done trauma work for a really long time. And I've noticed that what's very important for me is to begin to notice, to do the body scanning and notice myself when I feel like I'm sort of losing myself. That phrase is something that Simone Biles had said. I'm sure a lot of us are pretty familiar with the gymnast Simone Biles, who said, I lost myself in the air, on her way coming down from one of her airborne routines. And so it's really important for us to recognize when we're losing ourselves. Recognize it first and learning how to hold that space for ourselves. First part is recognizing it. And the second part is, okay, what do we do about it, right? How do we begin to hold that space for ourselves? Deep breathing, there's some external things that we can do. And it's also really beginning to find those that we trust and that trust us, that we're in that social connection circle with. I've spoke about that before. Creating safe space circles for yourself with people that you trust and that you love and that know you very well and that can help you recognize when you're losing yourself in the air, so to speak, sort of like what Simone Biles says. The key is that, especially with trauma work and as first responders, is oftentimes that we don't recognize that this is happening to us. And that's some of the things that I think is like really important, is to recognize that it's happening. So that's where that care circle comes in. Those people that are in your life that you care about, they care about you, to help you to notice when you're having a hard time. I'll give an example. I was doing some trauma work in a school with some young people for a long period of time. And then one night I came home and I was putting the keys in the door and I could hear my kids running away from the door when they were younger. And I thought, that's peculiar. They're running away from the door. And they said, Mommy's home. So rather than running to the door to come and greet me, I heard them running into the back rooms and closing. They were hiding. And I thought, what in the world's going on? What's happening with them? And then so I stepped in and the kid said, that I was just sort of grumpy. And I had not noticed it. And the kid said, well, Mommy, I know that you had a hard day today. And I thought, well, did I? But just that part where the kids were like, oh no, Mommy needs her space when she comes in. Huh? Oh, okay. And I said, and that really hurt my feelings for me. I was like, oh no, where's the joy, right? But I had not noticed. And a friend of mine noticed and said, Babalwa, you've really been on edge a lot lately. Something is going on. What's going on? And I had not seen it for myself. So I stopped and I noticed and started paying attention. And then I started designing workshops on helping people to notice the trauma for themselves. But I had to go through it myself and figure it out first for a long time. So what I'd like for us to do is to have some piece where you drop into the chat or you begin to sort of just say, what is it that you notice that sort of lets you know that you were in that part, in that space. And this is what someone put in there from Sarah, looks like it said, reminds me of skills I've learned to be aware of, you know, around mindfulness and depression and things like that. So thank you for sharing. That's very, very special. And to, what do you notice in yourself when you get to that space where you feel like you are beginning to lose yourself? You just drop it in the chat. Like, what happens for you? There is one piece that, in very early phases too. Okay, so let me back up with that story that I told. One of the things that I noticed for me is that I was always losing things. And it was always my keys. I don't know what it is to this day about the keys, but I was always losing my keys. I would go and I would just drop my keys and then go look for my key all the time. So that began to let me know. And now when it happens, I go, whoop, stop. Okay. So as people are dropping things in the chat, I want to tell you something, a tool, it's called the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s. And so what the ABCs are antecedent, behavior, and the consequence. The antecedent part is something that happens before the behavior. It happens before we begin upset or getting angry or what have you. Then we got to deal with those consequences that happens after that. An antecedent to a behavior oftentimes are things that we don't notice. The smaller things for me, sometimes physically, and you can write other things in the chat too. What are your antecedents? For mine, I know I mentioned to you dropping the keys, that's 1. And 2, I notice sometimes I get a tingle in my face, even before I drop the keys, or my jaws begin to clench a little more. And this is before night, and that's when I sort of stop. The important part is that learning how to stop it before it goes up higher. That's one of those therapeutic tools. When it gets to that point, it's like, oh, I have to stop. Whether it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it is, or knowing if you know, I need to take a day off. Knowing yourself, because it's easier to manage it when it's at a lower level, okay, in that antecedent phase than it is before it takes off the other way. It's harder to manage it. So some of the people started saying grumpy and wanting to sleep more. Yes, I recognize that one for myself too. And someone else mentioned about my space becomes reflection of my scattered mind. Nothing is organized exactly. Like, it's okay. And you're seeing, and the people that love you, when they walk into your office space or into your personal space and they can see it scattered, it's like, okay, I know that this, my partner needs some support, or my teammate needs some support, and everything agitates you. And I love these things that are in the chat. And some folks saying, I can't focus on a single task. I'm unmotivated, or headache or ringing in the ears. And some signs, you know, daily walks and things like that. And those are in FaceTime families. And those are some strategies too. We're going to get into quite a few strategies today too. So I think the first part is really beginning to notice it and acknowledge it. Oftentimes as teachers and educators, that's one of the things that we don't do, is acknowledge it to ourselves, is that we're having a hard time, let alone to our students, because the students notice first, oftentimes before we do. So that's important too. So if there's other pieces too, feel free to drop it in the chat. And Melinda, we're going to take a little bit of time in a few minutes, a couple minutes here for some breakout groups. If that's possible, if it's possible for you to set that up for me, that would be fantastic. So, and I think there are about close to 60 people here. And so I'd imagine groups of 5 would be fantastic. And the goal here, you know, within that part of why talking about it is there's another strategy. And there's this brain science too around looking at how to, it's something called affect regulation. And so once we begin to notice it, we've got to do something to manage our affect or regulate our affect. What that means is sort of like our feeling and what's happening to us, our thinking, our ability to focus. when someone mentioned in the chat that it's difficult to focus or become, okay, thank you. Maybe like 10 minutes, 10 minutes, thank you. And so what's happening is that the brain is starting to go offline. The brain is starting to go into that flight, fight, or freeze or fawn phase. It's starting to say, I feel like I'm under attack. Even if there's no physical threat that's there, mentally it starts to say, I feel like I'm getting ready to go under attack. I have got to protect myself. So when we begin to regulate our affect, like affect regulation, we can sort of put a pause on that from happening between that cognitive brain going offline and that lower brain beginning to take over. And that's when we have some of those responses with each other that, like I said, that antecedent behavior and those behavior pieces that we have that will have to deal with those consequences later. Like we may say some things that we don't intend to say to someone else because we're responding from a trauma point of view, from a trauma lens. And the words that come out are trauma filled. And the words that are received are trauma filled and trauma inducing. It's not someone's fault. It's not intentional. These are some things that begins to happen when the brain goes there. All right, when we get to that phase, like when we feel like, oh my gosh, we're dealing with so much. Why do I focus on that? A lot because we're in such a situation now, like I mentioned before, where the trauma is all around us, trauma and loss around us. And there's something Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about a lack of an opportunity to heal. We're moving so fast that we don't have an opportunity to kind of stop and breathe and think. So one of the things I'd like for us to do when we begin to do our breakout is just take 5 minutes and just sort of share, if you feel comfortable and safe in doing that, what are some things that you begin to notice about yourself and your environment, that lets you know that, okay, this is sort of give me a clue that I'm getting ready to get really stressed out. And what are some really helpful strategies that you use to sort of combat that, to manage that early on? Even if it's strategies that you don't use, strategies that you'd like to use to combat that. I saw some folks sort of drop that into the chat a little earlier about going for walks or things like that. The practice of being able to talk to each other about it is another practice that helps to build that rewiring in the brain, that helps us to begin to practice that affect regulation. These are some things that we're going to model for our students, but we've got to model it for ourselves first, okay? Because that part's really important. So if we could take just 5 minutes and go into our breakout rooms and just sort of share out, and then when you come back, I'll ask you to share out with the group, if you feel comfortable in doing that. Again, what are some things that you notice? Remember that ABC model: antecedent, behavior, consequences. What are some of those antecedents that you notice that are happening in yourself? And what are some things or some practices that you're using to help you to manage that when you notice it right away? And if you don't notice it, that's fine too, but just spend some time to doing that, and then we'll come back together and regroup, okay? All right, thank you, Melinda.